It had been 3 peaceful weeks since I moved into Maple Creek Estates, a gated suburban community that promised quiet living and neighborly harmony. The brochure showed wide lawns, smiling families, and the occasional golden retriever chasing a ball. I bought into that dream. After years of city noise, I was ready for silence, and for a while, I got it. The mornings were peaceful, with dew on the grass and the faint smell of pine drifting through my open kitchen window. My dog Max would sit by the porch, soaking up the sunlight. Then came the knock, a sharp, impatient bam, bam, bam. I opened the door, and there she was. Karen. She looked like she had walked straight out of a rule book. Perfectly pressed pastel blouse, enormous sunglasses, and a clipboard clutched against her chest like a weapon. "Good morning," she said in a tone that made it sound like an accusation. "You must be the new homeowner." "Yeah," I said cautiously. "Mark, just moved in." Her eyes darted past me, scanning my living room like she was doing a security check. "I'm Karen," she declared. "Neighborhood watch captain, also head of the HOA Compliance Committee." "Oh, okay," I said, unsure whether to shake her hand or salute. She didn't wait for an invitation and stepped forward onto my porch. "You know, your mailbox is 2 inches taller than regulation height. Section 3, Line 7 of the Community Guidelines states that mailboxes must be exactly 42 inches from the ground." I blinked. "You measured my mailbox?" "Of course," she said. "I measure everyone's." I let out a small laugh, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. That first encounter was uncomfortable, but I brushed it off. Every neighborhood had one, the self-appointed sheriff who policed everyone's lawns. I thought if I stayed polite, she'd lose interest. I was wrong. Over the next few days, strange little things began happening. One morning, my trash bins were moved closer to the curb, even though garbage day wasn't until Friday. The next day, my gate was open, even though I always locked it. Then a package went missing from my porch. It felt small at first. Coincidences. But then one night, I was watching TV when I heard the faint squeak of my backyard gate. Max growled. I walked to the window, peeked through the blinds, and froze. Under the faint glow of the porch light was Karen, flashlight in hand, slowly walking around my yard. My pulse spiked. I stormed outside. "Hey, what are you doing?" She jumped, turned toward me calmly as if I was the one trespassing. "I'm performing a property inspection," she said flatly. "At 9 o'clock at night?" She shrugged. "Some residents hide unsightly items behind their fences. As head of compliance, it's my duty to ensure aesthetic standards." "You're trespassing," I snapped. "You can't just walk into my property." She smirked. "If you don't have anything to hide, you shouldn't mind." I wanted to scream, but she simply turned and walked off, completely unfazed. The next day, I checked my security footage. She had been there twice that week, once during the day and once while I was at work. She'd peeked through my windows, taken photos of my yard, and even tried my doorknob once. That's when I realized this wasn't nosiness. This was breaking and entering. I called the HOA office, hoping to get help. The president, a tired-sounding man named Tom, picked up. "Oh, Karen again," he sighed. "She's been overzealous lately, but her heart's in the right place." "In the right place? She's breaking into my yard." "She just cares about keeping the community beautiful," he said. That was the last straw. That night, I sat in my living room, lights dimmed, watching the live feed from my outdoor camera. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. Around 11:30 p.m., movement flickered on my screen. A shadow, short, quick, and unmistakable, crept along the side of my house. I zoomed in. It was her. Again. She crouched near the porch, pulled something from her bag, what looked like a measuring tape and a notepad. I could barely believe what I was seeing. "Unbelievable," I whispered. I quietly stepped onto my porch. "Karen!" She froze mid-measurement. "Mark," she said stiffly, like she hadn't just been caught red-handed. "You really shouldn't sneak up on people. You really shouldn't be on my property," I shot back. She gave a fake smile. You're new here. You'll learn that the HOA has certain privileges. Oh, I've learned plenty already, I said. And the first lesson is, stay out of my yard. She left, muttering about community standards, and disappeared into the dark. That night, as I watched her blue-tinged silhouette fade down the street, an idea began to form. If the HOA wasn't going to stop her, then I would have to teach her a lesson myself. Not a cruel one, not a dangerous one, but one she would never forget. That's when I looked over at my garage shelf and saw it, a half-empty can of bright blue paint from when I painted the porch rails last month. A slow smile crept across my face. Oh, Karen, I muttered, picking up the can. You're about to get a new shade of neighborhood watch.
Bro, imagine someone just walking into your house like it's their own. This woman got no limits. I would have lost it right there.
The next morning, I couldn't get the image of Karen sneaking around my yard out of my head. The woman had crossed every possible line and somehow still thought she was untouchable. As I sat at my kitchen table sipping coffee, Max snoozing at my feet, my eyes drifted back to that blue paint can sitting by the garage door. The idea from the night before still buzzed in my brain like static. Ridiculous, maybe, but also perfect. I wasn't about to hurt anyone. I just wanted to make a point, a bright, unmistakable one. So that afternoon, I went to work. First, I checked my front porch camera, making sure it was angled just right. Then, I carefully unscrewed the top hinge on my gate post and slid the can of blue paint inside a small box I'd rigged to the top corner. I added a simple trigger, a bit of fishing wire attached to the latch. Anyone who tried to push or lift the gate from the outside would get an instant paint shower. Simple, harmless, satisfying. When I finished, I couldn't help but grin. Let's see you write a report about this, Karen. I didn't have to wait long. By sunset, I was grilling burgers on the back porch when my neighbor Sophie wandered over. She was holding a watering can and shaking her head. Mark, she said, chuckling, I saw Karen this morning pacing in front of your driveway again. She had a notebook. I laughed. Of course she did. She's obsessed, Sophie said. Last week she told me my wind chime was audibly offensive. I almost choked on my drink. Audibly offensive? That's new. We both laughed, but the truth was, it wasn't funny anymore. Karen wasn't just being nosy, she was acting like she owned the neighborhood. That night, around 11 hours, I sat up in the living room with my security feed pulled up on my tablet. The moonlight cast a pale glow across the yard. Max was asleep on the couch beside me, tail twitching. For a while, everything was quiet. Then, movement. There she was again. Karen crept into the frame like a ghost in pastel pajamas, clutching that same clipboard. She stopped by my gate, squinted, and pulled out her flashlight. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, I muttered, my pulse picking up. She crouched down, inspecting the hinges like some kind of detective. Then she grabbed the latch. The fishing line twitched. Snap! A second later, the can tipped. A glorious splash of thick blue paint poured straight over her hair, blouse, and clipboard. She froze in shock, mouth open, dripping like a Smurf. For a full 5 seconds, she just stood there, completely motionless. Then came the scream. Ah! What have you done? I nearly fell off the couch laughing. Max jumped up, barking wildly at the noise. I opened the door, pretending to be startled. Karen? What happened to you? Her eyes were wide, blue streaks running down her cheeks. You set a trap for me! Trap? I said innocently. Karen, you're not supposed to be in my yard. This is vandalism, she shrieked. I'm calling the HOA. Good idea, I said with a grin. I'll call the police while you're at it, since you were trespassing. Her jaw dropped. She froze, realizing the camera above the porch was pointed straight at her. Her voice wavered. You wouldn't... Oh, I definitely would, I said calmly. But I'll tell you what. If you promise to never step on my property again, maybe I'll forget this happened. Karen glared at me, trembling with fury and embarrassment. Then she stormed off, dripping blue paint the whole way down the street, her heels clicking furiously against the pavement. I stood there watching her go, half amused, half relieved. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control again. The next morning, Sophie came over holding her phone, barely able to speak through her laughter. "Mark, you have to see this." She showed me a post on the neighborhood Facebook group. "Attention. Someone vandalized HOA Captain Karen's property last night. She was covered in blue paint, cameras everywhere. We're investigating." The comments were pure gold. Maybe she finally ran into her own rules. I bet she measured the wrong door this time. Blue suits her. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. But then, a new comment appeared, from Tom, the HOA president himself. "We take all incidents seriously. I'll personally be visiting the affected homes today to review security footage." I froze mid-laugh. Security footage? If Tom saw my video, he'd know exactly what happened, and I could end up in serious trouble. Sophie saw the look on my face and frowned. "You didn't actually—" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I might have rigged something." "Oh, Mark," she sighed. "You know she won't stop until she gets even." She was right. Later that afternoon, as I was re-watching the footage, equal parts proud and nervous, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera feed. Karen, standing there again, cleaned up, furious, and holding a thick folder. "Oh no," I muttered. Round 2. As I opened the door, she shoved the folder in my face. "I've filed an official complaint with the HOA and with law enforcement. You'll be hearing from both soon. Karen, you broke into my yard. And you assaulted me with paint," she hissed. "Let's see how funny you think it is when the board reviews this." I wanted to yell, but I held back. Losing my cool now would just give her power. "All right," I said evenly. "Let's let them handle it." As she stormed off down the driveway, I watched her go. But something in her posture made me uneasy. She wasn't just angry. She was plotting. And I had a bad feeling she wasn't done yet. Because when Karen felt humiliated, she didn't just fight back. She went to war.
Okay, this man is a genius. I mean, blue paint on the door, that's creative revenge right there. I already know this is gonna end bad for Karen.
I barely slept that night. Between rewatching the footage and worrying about what Karen might do next, my mind was racing. By morning, I had an official-looking email in my inbox. Subject: HOA Disciplinary Review, Attendance Required. I sighed. Of course. It was scheduled for that evening at the community clubhouse, the same place where neighbors usually gathered for cookouts and trivia nights. But tonight, it was being transformed into Karen's personal courtroom. I showed up early. The long oak table was already set up, with name cards for each board member. Tom, the HOA president, sat at the center looking like a man who regretted every life choice that led him here. Across from him sat Karen, in a perfectly pressed blazer, folder in hand, glaring at me like a prosecutor about to deliver a death sentence. "Good evening, everyone," Tom began, forcing a smile. "We're here to discuss an alleged incident involving one of our homeowners, Mr. Mark, and an unfortunate blue paint accident." "Accident?" Karen snapped. "That man assaulted me." I tried not to laugh. "Karen, you were trespassing on my property. Again." She whipped open her folder dramatically, revealing a stack of glossy photos. "These are from my security camera, evidence that this individual intentionally rigged a dangerous contraption designed to humiliate me." Tom pinched the bridge of his nose. "Karen, we're not a court of law." She slammed the folder shut. "Then maybe we should start acting like one." The room went silent. A couple of other neighbors, there as witnesses, exchanged awkward looks. Finally, Tom turned to me. "Mark, do you admit to setting up the paint?" I nodded. "I do, but only after weeks of harassment. I have footage of her trespassing multiple times, at night. She even tried my door handle once. A murmur went through the room. Karen's face turned red. Lies! I was performing a compliance check. At midnight? I said, raising an eyebrow. One of the neighbors, an older man named Frank, chuckled. You do tend to overcheck, Karen. She spun toward him. Excuse me? Remember when you measured my hedges during dinner? He said flatly. My wife still brings that up. Everyone tried to stifle their laughs. Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. All right, he said. Let's stay focused. Mark, do you have your footage? I nodded, pulling out my tablet. Within seconds, the big screen on the wall lit up with crystal clear night vision. There she was, Karen, flashlight in hand, tiptoeing through my backyard like a spy in a sitcom. Then, the moment of truth. She grabbed the latch, the wire pulled, and splash. The sound of paint splattering echoed through the speakers, followed by her unmistakable shriek. The room erupted. Laughter, gasps, even a few claps. Karen jumped to her feet. This is not funny. I was traumatized. Tom tried, and failed, to keep a straight face. Karen, it's difficult to argue you weren't trespassing. Her jaw tightened. So what, you're taking his side? I'm saying, Tom replied, choosing his words carefully, that it appears Mark acted in response to repeated boundary violations. Boundary violations? She shrieked. He painted me blue. From the back of the room, Sophie raised a hand. Maybe the universe was just trying to color code the problem. Everyone burst out laughing again. Even Tom cracked a grin. Karen turned on her heel, furious. This entire board is corrupt. I will be escalating this to corporate HOA management. Tom held up a calming hand. Karen, before you do that, I should inform you. This meeting is being recorded, and per HOA policy, repeated unauthorized entry into a resident's property is grounds for disciplinary action. Karen froze. What? Effective immediately, Tom continued. You're suspended from all compliance duties pending further review. Her eyes widened like he'd just handed her a pink slip. You can't suspend me. I am the HOA. No, he said patiently. You're a volunteer. And after this, maybe a retired one. Karen stood there shaking with rage, her blue-tinted hairline glinting under the fluorescent lights. Then she turned toward me. This isn't over, she hissed. You humiliated me. I'll make sure you regret it. I leaned back in my chair, calm and collected. You already said that the last 2 times you trespassed, Karen. Maybe 3rd time's the charm. That did it. She grabbed her folder and stormed out, leaving a trail of blue fingerprints on the door handle. As soon as the door shut, everyone burst into laughter again. Tom looked at me, still chuckling. Well, Mark, that might be the most entertaining HOA meeting I've ever attended. Glad I could help, I said with a grin. As I left the clubhouse, Sophie walked beside me, still giggling. I almost feel bad for her. Almost, I said, but deep down I knew. Karen wasn't the kind of person who accepted defeat. And sure enough, later that night, as I sat on my porch with Max at my feet, I noticed something strange. A small, dark SUV parked across the street, engine off, but the lights on. The driver's silhouette looked familiar, hair pulled back, clipboard on the dash. Oh no, I muttered. You've got to be kidding me. Karen hadn't given up. She was watching. And whatever she was planning next, I had a feeling it was going to be her biggest mistake yet.
No, bro, she really got smurfed. The visual of Karen covered in blue paint? Man, I would have paid to see that live.
The next few days were tense. Karen had gone quiet. Too quiet. No late-night flashlight patrols, no clipboard checks, not even a passive-aggressive flyer about proper hedge trimming. For most people, that would have been a relief. But for me, it was a warning. When someone like Karen goes silent, it's because she's plotting. And I was right. 3 days later, at around midnight, my dog Max started barking again. Loud, persistent. the kind of bark that meant trouble. I checked my phone, opened the security app, and my stomach dropped. Karen was back, but this time she wasn't alone. 2 people in dark hoodies were with her, one holding a crowbar, the other a flashlight. They crept up to my front gate, whispering. Karen was pointing toward my door, waving papers in her hand like she was leading an operation. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, already dialing the police. I turned on the outdoor mic and said, "You really don't learn, do you, Karen?" She froze, eyes wide. "You're on camera again?" "Always," I said through the speaker. "Smile for the HOA." The 2 guys with her panicked. "Yo, he's watching," one said, backing up fast. "Relax," Karen snapped. "He can't do anything. We're here to serve a notice." I laughed. At midnight? With a crowbar? That's when she realized I'd caught them red-handed, again. The men bolted toward their car. Karen tried to follow, but in her panic she ran straight into my gate, the same one she'd triggered before. Except this time, there was no paint. There was a new surprise. When I'd fixed the gate after the blue paint incident, I'd installed a small dye marker, a harmless but permanent marking spray that released if the latch was forced open. The second her hand yanked it, a puff of bright red dye exploded all over her clothes. Karen screamed, "Not again! What is this?" I almost felt bad. Almost. Within minutes, flashing blue lights flooded the street. 2 police cruisers pulled up, officers stepping out with flashlights. Karen stood there covered in red dye, yelling at the officers before they even spoke. "Officer, arrest him! He booby-trapped his own gate, again." The lead officer sighed. "Ma'am, you're standing on his property. Why are you here?" "I'm with the HOA," she snapped. "I was issuing a violation notice." "At midnight?" he said flatly. Karen's voice wavered. I had to confirm a report." Then Sophie came running out in her robe, phone in hand. "Officer, she's been harassing him for weeks. I've got everything on video." The cop turned to me. "You have footage too?" "Oh yeah," I said, holding up my tablet. "Full HD? Want me to airdrop it?" A few minutes later, the officer watched the footage, the trespassing, the crowbar, the red dye explosion, and just shook his head. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "you're lucky this man didn't press charges earlier." Karen sputtered. "Charges? I'm the victim! Look at me!" The other officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, you came here in the middle of the night, trespassing again with 2 unidentified men carrying tools. That doesn't look good." Her jaw dropped. "They were volunteers." The cop smirked. "Volunteers for what? Breaking and entering?" Sophie couldn't hold it in anymore. She burst out laughing. I crossed my arms. "I think that's enough community service for one night, Karen." Tom, the HOA president, arrived a few minutes later, looking half asleep and fully done with life. "Karen, what on earth happened now?" She pointed at me. "He assaulted me, again." Tom sighed. "Karen, you've been warned multiple times. You were suspended." "I was doing my duty," she insisted. He turned to the officer. "Please, whatever you have to do, do it. This woman has terrorized half the neighborhood." The officer nodded. "Ma'am, you're coming with us tonight for trespassing and disturbance." Karen's voice went high and shaky. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA captain." Tom muttered, "Not anymore, you're not." And that was it. The cops led her to the cruiser, her red-dyed hands leaving streaks on the door as she screamed about neighborhood safety and property rights. When they drove off, the entire street felt lighter, peaceful. Sophie turned to me, grinning. "Guess she finally painted herself into a corner." I laughed. "Guess so." Tom sighed, rubbing his face. "Mark, I'll be honest, I should have stopped this sooner. She's been out of control for months." "It's all right," I said. "She did it to herself." He nodded. "We'll handle the paperwork, and maybe retire the HOA for a while." As the crowd started to disperse, I looked up at my house. Blue paint still faintly visible near the gate, red dye stains on the ground, and Max wagging his tail proudly at the door. "Good work, buddy," I said, patting him on the head. Looks like peace and quiet are finally back. He barked once, as if to agree. The next morning, the neighborhood Facebook page exploded again. Photos of Karen in red dye were everywhere. Someone had captioned it, HOA leader sees red, literally. It went viral in our community group. Even Tom left a laughing emoji. For the first time since moving to Maple Creek Estates, I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, sun rising, truly relaxed. No measuring tapes, no trespassing, no clipboard tapping, just quiet. Finally. I smiled and looked at the gate. Maybe I should paint it blue again, I muttered. You know, for tradition. Max barked once more as if to say, "Go for it." And with that, the legend of the blue and red HOA Karen came to an end. Though if you ask me, I think she might still be out there somewhere, measuring someone else's mailbox.
And that's what happens when karma comes knocking. She really turned herself into a walking art project. Can't lie though, she deserved every bit of it. Alright guys, that's the end of the story. If you enjoyed this HOA chaos, hit that like button, drop your favorite part in the comments, and make sure you are subscribed because the next Karen story is even crazier. See you next time, bye bye.